All right, so today's episode is with Todd Mead. And Todd is a great hunter, hunts mostly public land. He's from the Adirondacks, actually grew up not too far from where I did, I think about an hour apart from each other. Um, so he's grown up hunting big woods, chasing mature bucks in a really hard area to hunt in the Adirondacks. And he found himself killing mature bucks year after year there. I think he said once he did it 10 years in a row, he realized that maybe he wanted to try a different challenge, and that's what got him starting to explore the Midwest and doing more bow hunting in the Midwest. Todd is a competitive archer as well. He's a really, really good competitive archer. So if people are listening from that space, you'll know much more about his credentials there. Whereas I'm kind of talking to him more about his hunting credentials. I think we bring it up a couple times in the podcast, but he wrote three books. This one is the only one still available, Pursuing Public Land Bucks, and it's about DIY hunts, strategies for finding new places to go with your buddies, how to go about it, how to kind of hone in on big buck areas. So we talk a lot about that kind of stuff, and we do talk a little bit about um, archery and competitive archery as well. Um, I guess it's a good time to bring up that Huntstock, and if you haven't heard yet, Huntstock is producing the Air Force Archery Games, which is a new innovative take on what we see as potentially being a new sport. Now, this is just the first version of it. It's a speed shoot. It's designed for you to get in and out, just dip your toe in. This type of a shoot. We're doing it at the Springfield Sportsman Show, February 24th through the 26th. You can do it competitively if you want. We're going to have definitely a competitive option, or you can just come and shoot it for fun. Again, it's going to take 90 seconds. All you got to do is bring your bow to the show. If you end up forgetting your bow, we're going to have bows there that we can easily adjust and get you set up to get out and shoot the course anyway. But bring your bow um, and shoot this course. What it is a three zones. The first zone is a 3D target. We're going to have Delta McKenzie targets there, and you shoot two arrows into a 3D target at 10 yards. We're confined in space. There's not going to be any long shots. Two arrows into a 10-yard 3D target. Then you move over to zone two, which is going to be a jet sled. And we're going to put 50 pounds of weight in that jet sled if you're a woman, and 100 pounds of weight in that jet sled if you're a man. You got to push it 15 yards and then pull it back 15 yards into its original positioning. So that's just designed to kind of get your heart rate up a little bit, get you doing a little bit of exercise in between shooting your final two arrows. So you go over to zone three. That's an 18-yard shot into a 3D target from there. So and those final two arrows are worth double the points as those first two that you shot only from 10 yards before the jet sled. So hopefully it adds some drama. I think it's going to be really, really exciting because you're kind of racing against the clock. And from what I've learned about competitive archery, 3D archery so far, it's kind of been a lot of the same, stuff going on for years. And I always want to come in with a fresh set of eyes and try to innovate and do something new. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, right? But we think that this could be really cool. And in the future, creating some hunting scenarios, expanding it a little bit so it's not just three zones. If we do it outdoors, we have more space to expand and try things out. So adding in different potential hunting scenarios, longer distances on the shots, and making that clock not 90 seconds. Maybe you do it and it's a 10-minute course or something like that. So we want to see how that works. Um, we have $5,000 in door prizes for anybody that comes to do it. The shoot is completely free. It's for all ages. So you just got to get your ticket to the Springfield Sportsman Show. Once you're in there, the shoot is free, and everybody is entered to win into the $5,000 worth of door prizes that we have, which includes some Onyx memberships. We'll have some archery equipment. We'll have arrows. We'll have hunt stock tickets, 3-day passes we're giving away. We bought a PlayStation 5. If you want to get your teenagers into, signed up to do this. I know everybody wants those PlayStation 5s. Maybe you're in your 20s or 30s and you're a gamer too. So we wanted to throw in some non-hunting, non-archery related door prizes. So we got a PS5, we got an Apple Watch in there as well. We've got a saddle from Buzzard's Roost. We got some ropes and saddle climbing ropes from New York Saddle Hunter. There's going to be a bunch of cool stuff, swag, sweatshirts, t-shirts from Hunt Suburbia, Hunt Stock, and potentially a couple of our other partners there. So there's going to be a ton of door prizes. We're imagining only 300 shooters potentially. So if you enter this thing, you're going to have a really good shot at winning some door prizes. So if that's not incentive enough, it's just going to be a really fun shoot. So we're partnered up with the Air Force on that, and I look forward to seeing you guys there. So come see us at the Springfield Sportsman Show. We're going to have our hunt stock booth too, but we're producing this really cool new concept, the Air Force Archery Games, and I just encourage you guys to bring your bow and test it out. We want to get at least 300 people doing it. Um, you can go to huntstockevents.com. That is our new website that's been live now for a couple of weeks. Huntstockevents.com is going to have everything about Huntstock, all the up to date stuff there. You can link from there to go get your Huntstock tickets. There's a tab on there that talks more about the Air Force archery games, and you can click on that tab and then hit the pre register button, because if you pre-register for the Air Force archery games, you're going to get 3 entries into the door prizes. Whereas if you just show up and you register on site at the event, you're only getting one. So if you want to improve your chances of winning these awesome door prizes, hit that pre-register link and share it with your buddies and share it around, because if this is successful, if enough people get through it and, we get some good feedback on it, this is something that we want to bring to the world of archery and to bow hunters, and expand upon this and make it something that can potentially become a whole new sport and something exciting in the world of 3D archery. So I hope you guys check that out. On the hunt stock note, before we get into the Todd Mead podcast, um, hunt stock tickets are available as well. The first 1,000 people who buy a Saturday, a ticket that includes Saturday anyway, it can be any 3-day pass or it can be a Saturday only ticket. They're going to get entered into the special raffle for a Woodman Arms one of one Hunt Stock Woodman Arms collaboration muzzleloader. We're still not even close to selling out those first 1,000 tickets. So get on there, buy your tickets, reserve your spot early so that you can get entered into that truly one of a kind Woodman Arms raffle. Um, Beyond that, the festival space for sponsors at Huntstock is filling up really fast. We've got a lot of big brands that'll be coming this year. Last year was a lot of Northeastern brands, which is great, and we're going to keep that energy and that feel and that vibe to Huntstock. There's going to be a lot. All the Northeastern brands are coming back again. We're getting more Northeastern companies involved, even some big Northeastern companies that weren't there last year. But we're also attracting some brands from the Midwest and from out west that will be coming and displaying their products and bringing experiences. As we always mention, everything at Huntstock is about experience, experience, experience. So all these new sponsors that are going to be coming this year, we're encouraging them to come up with something super unique to add to that festival experience and make it cool and not just your everyday booth that you sit behind and don't really do much. So it's all about experience, not being boring. But we're going to start rolling out announcements probably, I would say, in March and April on the new sponsors that are coming in, where the door prizes are, because we're going to do the same 25, $30,000 plus in door prizes. I always like to shoot low. It ends up being more than what we say we're going to do. But there's going to be a great door prize packages again at Huntstock this year. We're going to be adding podcasters, new podcasters, new seminar speakers, bunch of new YouTubers will be coming as well. Uh, and then we're going to do pretty much the same. All the other stuff that we did last year is going to be there as well, but we're going to be enhancing the experience and adding new exhibits, new entertainment. Another thing that just came to mind. We want to, if you've shot a buck that you have 3 years of shed history with, preferably you have full sets for at least 3 years before we ended up killing them, and then you also have the mount. We want to do we're working on an exhibit at Huntstock that'll kind of show those special stories, and tell those special stories. So if you have at least 3 years of sheds of a buck that you ended up killing and you want to potentially display that buck and tell that story at Huntstock, get in touch with me, huntsuburbia@gmail.com, or DM me on any of the social medias. And then back to real quick on the festival side, the expo space, the sponsorship festival space, even the podcast or YouTuber space, we're limited there. So, and it's selling pretty fast. It's much, much faster. We already have 38 exhibitor booths um, locked in so far. So last year, it's already more than was there last year. And I think, I don't know exactly, we might have space for 70 total exhibitor booths. So if you want to lock in a space too, make sure you get in touch with me as soon as you can. And that's it. It's going to be a lot of fun again this year. We're looking forward to Huntstock. We're looking forward to the Air Force Archery Games. Expanded more into 3D archery space this year. Doing something a little bit different at Huntstock with 3D archery, keeping our same unique scoring system, but maybe changing the route a little bit. We're opening up 3D archery earlier than we did last year. So basically, I think 7 a.m. We're going to try to open up the 3D archery course, and we're delaying the opening of the festival by just an hour every day. So 10 a.m. on Saturday, the sponsorship festival and all the entertainment opens up. So you got a 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock window on Saturday to shoot. On Friday, you'll have that same, I think it's 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. window where you can shoot early, get out on the course, do that, and then still have get back in time to experience everything that Huntstock has to offer. So super, super busy part of the year for me. We'll see you guys at the Springfield show and the podcast. I'm going to be doing a lot more podcasts remotely. This style recording online. I'd love doing the in person podcast, but again, it's just so hard with two young kids now, and just the pool of people that can travel, within a couple hour radius, and there's a lot of you guys. And I still, if anybody wants to get on the podcast, you got something to share, I'm always open. Send me a DM, send me an email. Because I do like doing them in person, but doing it over in an online studio like this is going to open up a bunch of opportunities to get, guys all across the country who have important knowledge to share with everybody. So we're going to be getting back onto a regular schedule. Um, by March, we'll be back doing them weekly, but maybe we'll be doing them weekly from here on out too. It's just February is so busy right now, so I'm going to be trying to bring you guys some great interviews. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for being patient with the downtimes and the lulls and all that. And I really appreciate all the support as usual. Let's get into the podcast with Todd Mead. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Hunt Suburbia podcast. This is the first one kind of doing not in person. But I'm sitting here with Todd Mead, somebody I've wanted to interview for a long time. Todd's an accomplished public land hunter. And I guess you're accomplished in the world of competition archery too, aren't you?
I guess some would say that. It all depends, I guess. I've shot archery for a long time. I guess I tell people I have three passions. They're hunting, writing, and archery. Not sure which one I'm most passionate about, but I'd say probably archery, but I'm probably the worst at that of all of them.
So what is so by the way, talking about that, it's this is Todd's book, Pursuing Public Land Bucks. And I was going to comment how great of a writer you are, because I mean it's an easy read, and but that doesn't mean there's not color to the way that you write. It's really quite beautiful, man. So I just wanted to congratulate you on that book and the way that you portrayed everything throughout it.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I guess I guess you would say I'm a storyteller. So that book right there was my third book, and the first two I just took like 10 deer heads I had, and I figured I'd write a story about each one of them. And if it I was really doing it for my family, so my family would have it after I was gone. And I figure it would be passed down generations, but in order to sell something you got to kind of market yourself, which I'm not a big fan of. And then that book kind of took off. Then I wrote another one about 10 more deer heads, And then everybody started asking me how I actually hunted. So then I decided to do a, I guess you'd call it a how to book, but I didn't really want to tell people how to because I'm not really even sure how to do it. So I just used examples that I had along the way and things that have helped me kill deer. They might not necessarily be the right way, but it's just things that help me along the way.
Well, it's funny saying that a lot of people when they get into either filming, I hear it a lot. You get into filming or writing a book or even doing the podcast. It's like I just want to have something that I could pass down or something to be able to share with. It starts with immediate family members and friends, right? But then it can turn into, oh man, there's a market for this. People really enjoy what I have to say, or they're learning something from this, and you got to keep you kind of you keep doing it because of that. It kind of fuels it, right?
Yeah, it's. I mean, some of the biggest like when I started this. I mean, I guess you would say all the you most of the YouTube stuff was in its infancy, and then I watched it progress, and I kind of, I guess you would say, stepped back, and I'm not a big fan of being in the limelight and telling people how to do things. I think we have far too many people telling others how to do things when in reality they don't really have enough experience to be telling people, and it kind of gets under my skin. Because I've heard a lot of people just regurgitate information they heard elsewhere, and they have no idea what they're talking about. Um, and it goes back to the whole thing. Like, I mean, I'll tell you right now, like there are far better hunters than me. The only reason anybody ever really was drawn to me was because I wrote a book, and that's some of the problems out there now. People are drawn to people who create, content, and it doesn't necessarily mean those people are the people who know the most. I mean, I've learned a lot more from people that you've never heard of, anybody's never heard of, and those people are probably on the forefront of actually passing down information as compared to most people who pass it down due to, they're driven by ego, and ego is not necessarily a good thing in this whole industry.
Yeah, right. I call them ghosts. There's a lot more ghosts out there than the people who are creating content. There's ghost hunters who would prefer to not. They keep everything to themselves. They've got maybe a room full of trophies, or if not, they've got a head full of stories and knowledge. But they share it. They keep it real close to the chest, and they share it only with friends or hunting buddies or hunting partners. And it's something even I'll struggle with as a podcaster. And I've got a YouTube page, and I know I'm not the best hunter out there, so I try to interview people like yourself who have much better knowledge and longer track record and are a much better hunter than me, and try to draw as much out of you as I can for the listener, because I hope people don't think that I come across as I know everything. I absolutely don't. To a beginner, they could pick up some pointers, maybe from some nuggets here and there that I drop. But this podcast is mostly about the guests. But I struggle with that too, for sure.
It
I don't want to self promote. I don't want to come across as being somebody like that, because I do agree there's a problem in the industry there, and there's a lot of people who are maybe will let their ego get the best of them as they're putting content out.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes back to like what you just said. Like you're interviewing me because you can gain more information from me because I'm a great hunter. But in all reality, like I'm really not a great hunter. The only thing I'm great at is never giving up,
Yeah.
and I have like mental strength that most people probably don't have, and that's really the only thing that's allowed me to be successful. If we calculated the number of days that I spend in the woods and have spent in the woods since the first day I hunted, I would probably be considered the worst hunter in the world.
Well, why don't we start there, because that is a huge part of the formula from most people that I talk to too, and as I've just learned a ton over the last 3 years. It really is, to me, it's the more time that you can spend out in the woods is the better. I mean, time and persistence are the two main things. So How much of that is the reason for your success?
Probably 100%. I mean, I've heard people say, "Oh, I only hunt 2 days a year. I hunt 3 days a year," and you know, people that are considered successful. And I mean, I'd like to either have their skills or hunt in the areas they hunt, because the only thing that's allowed me to kill deer is the more you're around them, the more you're going to learn. And if you're not learning something, then you're probably not going to be too terribly successful. Um, I mean, I hunt a lot of different areas, but wherever I go, I try to learn something about the animals that live in that area. And no, in my experience, no two areas have really been the same. And so time spent in each area helps me a lot. I'm more of a kind of person who is find a deer and hunt that deer. I mean, I do tramp all through the woods like everybody else. But if I want to kill a specific deer, then I'm going to find where that deer lives and do everything I can to kind of figure out what he's doing, and hopefully maybe get lucky and get a look at him.
So for the listeners who might not know who you are or where you live or grew up or anything, so Todd, you grew up in the Adirondacks, right?
Yep. In the
And you,
southern edge of the Adirondack Park.
yep, and you did most of your hunting in the Adirondacks until one day, through networking, we can get into that. That you decided that you're going to go out west and try bow hunting out there, right? And then so now you've hunted kind of two majorly different styles. The big everlasting woods of the Adirondacks, right? It's what 7 million acres, something like that. Of big woods, no agriculture, pretty much massed feeding animals to the Midwest, where there's a lot of agriculture. There's private mixed with public land, and so you've learned how to hunt both those different deer. And I want to talk about the differences between those deer. But one thing that you just said, where you've heard some guys who can only hunt 1 or 2 or 3 days a year and they're successful. The first guy that came to mind when you said that was another Adirondack hunter, Jim Donito, that I've heard, and I haven't interviewed him yet, but I've heard that he's pretty notorious for, like, yeah, he might only hunt two days a year, but he waits for the snow. And trackers have that advantage, right? Where if you really only want to track and you wait for snow, then maybe you can catch up and kill a deer faster than us bow hunters. And I don't know if you track or do any rifle hunting at all either, but would love to get your thoughts on that.
I always make jokes with my a lot of my friends, and I tell them, because they're all like, "Oh, I love snow. I love snow." I'm like, I hate snow, and because I get wet, it's miserable. I can't stand it. And then I tell them, "You want to know what snow does? All snow does is make a bad hunter a good hunter." But of course, that makes people angry. But
I'm sure.
yeah, like I mean, it's like I tell people, you should really, like, I have one guy that I hunt with, young guy, like 27 years old, and he's killed most of his deer sitting, but he also likes tracking and still hunting, stuff like that. Same stuff that I do. If you live in big woods, that's what you're going to do. So I told him to figure out what he's the most successful at and spend his most time doing that. So I mean, that's kind of what I did along the way. Like I've killed deer every way you can kill them, and I'm the most proficient at finding a deer and killing it. Like, another thing too is I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I do put a lot of miles on, but it's like it's almost like sprint miles. You're gonna hustle to get to where you want to be, and then you're gonna hustle to get out, but you're not going like all day, because you know with my condition or whatever, I have to be a little bit more careful on what I carry and what I need to get through the day, stuff like that. And that's kind of why I'm more of what you would call a sitter.
And you are primarily a bow hunter, right? Like, do you
No, I love gun hunting.
you do?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
You give me a gun and I'm all set. Yeah. Like I mean, if
Yeah.
you're gonna hunt in the Adirondacks, if you're a bow hunter, then good luck to you, because the season is 2 weeks long, and it's in early October, and it's basically like hunting in a jungle. That's the only reason that I ever went to the Midwest, and that's because my passion is archery, and there's basically no archery hunting where I live. It's just, I mean, you could hunt with a bow. I mean, I could hunt with a bow instead of a gun, but where I live, where there's 1 to 3 deer per square mile, I'm gonna
Yeah,
take my gun with me.
yeah, yeah. Like this year I shot a deer with a bow, rifle, and muzzleloader, and for some reason, the last couple of years, I've been really trying to get 2 bucks in Massachusetts. You get 2 tags with a bow, and felt kind of like defeated, or I wasn't successful if I didn't fill both my tags with a bow. But this year, um, I had only filled 1 tag going into the gun season, and it was refreshing to get back into carrying a gun. That's I grew up hunting in Vermont, very similar to
Yeah,
um, southern Adirondacks, bigger woods, bigger chunks, but way less deer. You really got to work a lot harder to get into the pockets of deer. And so I grew up as a gun hunter, and it was just awesome to get back into carrying a gun this year.
yeah. I
And
mean, in all reality, I don't care what I'm carrying for a weapon. I'll kind of adapt to whatever I'm using. I've often thought in the last few years maybe I should put my gun away and see if I can kill one of these big deer in the Adirondacks with my bow during gun season, but I just haven't done it, and I probably won't.
so you've been still hunting the Adirondacks this whole time, right?
Oh
Every
yeah,
year you
yeah,
still.
no,
Yep.
yeah. I don't. I mean, that's where I live. People always ask me, well, why do you hunt there? And if there aren't that many deer, and I'm like, well, I hunt there because I live there. Don't you hunt where you live?
Yeah.
Unless you live in the city or something.
Well, that's why I started. So I moved to Boston in 2011, and it's a 4 hour drive to deer camp where I grew up hunting in Vermont. And when I finally bought a house in 2019, a couple of years ago now, I was like, you know what? Instead of driving to Vermont every time I getting an itch to hunt, I should probably try to learn to hunt around where I live. And that's where I had to learn to become a bow hunter, because I'm in the suburbs. You get small tracts of land. There's a lot of private. There's a lot of anti-hunting pressure, and towns are very anti-hunting with their laws and things like that in the area that I'm at. So it became a necessity to learn to hunt where I live, and it come to find out there's some really good hunting in the suburbs, and it's just been kind of a fun journey.
Oh yeah, I bet
So
it. I mean that's really why I went to the Midwest because I got to the point where I could, you know, regularly kill big deer in the Adirondacks, and like what is big, you know what I mean? Like that's a question, and it kind of depends on the area you're hunting. Like I always consider if I can kill the biggest deer in the area that I'm hunting, then I'm doing all right. In most places I hunt, if you kill a deer over 100 inches, then you've killed yourself a really good deer in the Adirondacks. There are bigger deer. You can kill a smasher, but at the same time, I would say if you killed a 125, 130-inch deer in the Adirondacks, for most people, it's probably a once in a lifetime deer. And the vast majority of people will never kill a deer like that.
yeah, same thing with Vermont. 100-inch deer around where my camp is and stuff. That's a great deer. And everything is regional. Let's start though. Yeah, let's. Why don't we start with the Adirondacks, then we'll move into a little bit of bow
Sure.
hunting. But your strategies for hunting the Adirondacks and finding a mature buck. Let's just go through kind of high level. You like to use a canoe or a kayak to get in deep sometimes. How do you find? Well, what's your strategy for locating a big mature buck in the Adirondacks?
Well, I mean, it goes back to the whole thing we were talking about earlier with content creators and stuff like that. I'm a little bit older, probably, than most of the people creating content. So I have, I think, what you would call a bigger resource to draw from, which is experience.
Yep.
So every year I'll go into a lot of areas that I've had success in the past, and I'll see if I can figure out if there's a deer there that I want to kill. And then as you know, or even the year before, like a lot of times I won't even hunt someplace. I'll go into it end of the season or a little bit during the end of the season, and I'll find out if there's a deer I want to kill in there, and then I'll hunt there the following year. Um, all it really comes down to is boot leather. Um, that's another thing too. Like, I mean, everybody, a lot of people think that oh, he's a sitter. He doesn't walk that much. Well, I'd be willing to bet I put on as many miles as most people who are, tracking or still hunting. I mean, like this year, I think, if you average your days, I mean, your miles in the woods. I think this year I averaged 6 miles a day in the woods.
Hmm.
So, I mean,
So
that's
you're kind of moving and moving until you find the sign, and
yeah. I'll
then
move and move, find the sign, and I'll try to find places where there are multiple, big deer. And if I can find an area like that, I'll kind of rotate through it and hopefully get lucky.
you're just looking for big scrapes, big rubs, and putting. Do you use trail cams at all to help you
Yeah, I
find?
use I in the past I used them a lot, which now basically, I mean, if you run them for I don't know 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I mean you should have a lot of data in certain areas. The biggest thing for me is just find where deer are in the daylight, especially bucks. Because if you find them there in the daylight, the chances are they'll be in those areas almost every year. I mean, this past year was, I mean, it was a little different because there was really no food in a lot of places. But like I've always hunt browsing areas where there really isn't any food. I mean,
Yeah,
occasionally there might be a beach crop, but I mean that's even limited every few years. So when everybody was bitching about no food this year, it really didn't affect me. I was because there's no food anytime where I hunt. So I mean, I kind of look for areas where if you're walking around, you jump deer a lot. I mean, that chances are deer are in there in the daylight. So if you know you jump them there, then go back there. Uh, a lot of people will jump a deer and never think twice about it. Well, if I go through there twice and I jump deer out of there both times, and I'm going to go back there. And I don't necessarily have to see any buck sign. I just know that the deer are there, and they. If I've been through there twice and I haven't been in there that much, chances are they hang out in there regularly. So just kind of using the information that's given to you along the way.
and even if you don't see buck sign there, there's
Yeah, I
the
mean,
fact that there's
to be honest, in most areas I hunt, they're really, I mean, like I have one area that I hunt that I've done really well in, and the reason I know I never see anybody there is there's no sign there. So it's uh, it's more like I almost look for places that I hate to call them funnels, um, but it's places where I know that the deer have really limited choices on where they can go. Um, and if you can narrow that down into like a couple 100 yard stretch here and there, your odds go significantly up. Um, but it has to be the right place. You can't go into any place like that. You need to know the reason why the deer go through there, and you don't know it until you're there. Just as an example, I hunted one place and I hunted it a lot, and I never saw any deer. And I'm like, why am I not seeing deer? Because I mean, the place I was in was littered with sign, had big rubs, scrapes, all sorts of stuff. So I knew big deer were in there. Well, then I just took a flyer on a chance that I could intercept them someplace else. It was only maybe I don't know 200 yards, 150 yards from where I had been going,
yep,
and there wasn't a lot of sign in there. But I had jumped deer in there a few times, and I went back there, and then I killed one of my biggest Adirondack deer there. So, and then since then, like now I know that spot's better than a lot of other places that I found, and I mean, people will walk right by it. It's not conducive to what most people would think would be a good place to set up.
yeah, because it's not just because there's not sign there doesn't mean the deer aren't always going to lay, especially probably in a funnel where they only have a couple 100 yards to make it through. They probably don't want to spend a lot of time in there that area. They want to just get through it, right? So,
Yeah, well,
are they going to be laying sign down in there? Maybe.
yeah, it's. I mean, it's different. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do hunt. I'm like a scrape hunter.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, a lot of people could probably do better if that's why like if you see a lot of people you'll see holy cow that guy killed a giant he never kills deer. Well, that's usually the reason because the people that don't know that much just go sit someplace and they don't know whether it's good or bad, and it's
Yeah.
usually one of those places. Like they're just sitting there, and the deer goes through there probably because it's not overly pressured, and then they
Hmm.
shoot a giant deer, and that's how some people, they'll kill a deer bigger than anything you ever imagined. And that might be the only, even the
Yep.
only deer they ever kill, and
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that's probably why.
Yeah, and that relates back to, me growing up hunting too. Like I didn't have any rhyme or reason to where I was sitting other than it looked like there was a funnel there. Like, oh, the deer are probably going to be coming down through that draw or over around the end of that ridge or next to that cliff, right? And that's where I would sit. Exactly. Just because I would think a deer has to walk through there at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, another thing too is, I mean, I put on so many miles over the years. Like I don't. It sounds odd, but I don't. I don't really. People ask me like, "Well, you just asked me, well, what do you do?" It's like I don't really know what I do. I just wander through the woods, and I'm like, oh, there's been a big deer here, and there hasn't been anything in here for 3 or 4 years, but he's here this year. And a lot of people will kill deer and just keep going back to the same spot, and you can get lucky and kill deer that way. Uh, but for the most part, I mean, you got to kind of figure out where you should be, and that's a secret about killing deer in big woods. If you're more of a sitter, is knowing where you have to be and when you have to be there, and that's a trait that's sometimes it's hard to know where you should be. Um, and I think if you're an overthinker, critical thinker, you're probably not going to do too terribly well because it's more of like a gut feeling type thing. You're like, oh, I got to
Yeah.
be in this spot today because whatever. And if you're thinking about it nonstop, you're like, oh, well, I should be there or I should be here. I mean, it creates too much like chaos in your mind, and then you're not really focused.
Yeah, it's an intuition thing of sorts,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that was another thing that had clicked with me. People who've listened to this podcast. I mean, when I just started it 3 years ago, I was a real average hunter. Now I'm just a little bit better. But the main thing that happened over these 3 years of working really hard, spending a lot more time in the woods, was learning how to filter through that chaos in my head. I was overthinking everything. When I first started to get serious about spending more time, I was driving myself nuts overthinking every single possible scenario. But now you can walk up to something, you can kind of see sign, and you kind of immediately have a feeling of, all right, why that sign was laid there, what the direction of travel the deer was going, why they're in there at that particular time. You put some cameras up and you start to like kind of what they say in football, right? The quarterback vision. You just got the vision of the field.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
see everything happening and read the defense. You can start to do that once you, but it only comes with time and experience. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, without the experience, I mean, it's your odds are definitely going to go down. But every day you're in the woods, you gain a little more experience. I mean, even now, I mean, in my mid 50s or whatever, like even now, I look back like sometimes, and I'm like, why did you just hunt there for 3 or 4 days? That was senseless. And but you don't realize it until after you've done it, and you're like, wow, I wasted a lot of time right there. And time is critical sometimes, and you have to take advantage when the time is good. And if you don't, then you're gonna end up empty handed. um, it's another thing too is like I'm when I go in the woods, I think a lot of people, maybe younger, even older people, I mean, they put so much pressure on themselves to kill a deer. If you're a content creator or whatever, you're like, oh, I need to kill a deer, I need to kill a deer, because of course you're not going to do anything. It's not going to be good for you if you don't. And I honestly don't care if I ever kill another deer in my life. It
Yep.
Like when I was younger, I was miserable. If I came home and I hadn't seen a deer, or it was like getting later in the season, I'm like, I was just miserable. I mean, nobody would want to be around me. And then as the years went by, I started killing big deer, and then it kind of became a regular thing. And now it's like I tell myself, if I never kill another deer in my life, I've probably done all right. And I just don't. I just don't put pressure on myself to kill a deer. I just go out and try to enjoy myself and make memories and tell stories, and it just makes hunting a little bit fresher, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like in some ways deer can sense your inner turmoil or your energies, just kind of, I don't know, it's some type of a sixth sense, but if you're anxious constantly or you're feeling pressure to kill something, I think it only can work against you, whether it's a philosophical sixth sense or something that a deer can feel. But I just think something's going to happen that's going to repel the animal away, or you away from the animal, if you're going out feeling that way constantly.
Yeah, I agree with that. The energy that you give off is kind of the energy that's received, I guess you'd say. And like I, when I'm sitting there or whatever, I just kind of like to pretend I'm one of the animals. And I, I'll tell you a little story. I mean, it's probably off topic, but one morning when I was in the Midwest, I got out of my truck and there was a little cat there, and the cat followed me. I mean, it followed me a good mile, and it's walking behind me. It was basically a kitten, and it's following me and it's meowing. So I got to the tree where I wanted to go, and I had a lone wolf climber. So I'm going to climb the tree, and the cat wouldn't go away, and I was shooting it, and it's in the dark, like it's dark out, like an hour before light or something, and I'm trying to shoot it away. It wouldn't go away. So it lays down under the tree. It was really cold that night, and it lays down on a tree and it gets light. It's like, I don't know, probably 8 o'clock, and it's just, I'm not sure if it's dead or what it's doing because I can see it down under my feet right at the base of the tree, and it hasn't moved since I climbed the tree. So I can hear a deer coming, and I stand up and I'm watching, and then the deer goes by me. So, and the cat never moves. So then after the deer was gone, I gave it a little little noise like, and the cat ran straight up the tree, and it got underneath my feet. So I sat down. It was underneath my feet. So a little while later, and it's just sitting there. It's kind of sleeping. So a little while later, I could hear another deer coming, and I stood up. And when I stood up, I stepped on the cat's tail, and he meowed like like crazy, like let out a shrieking meow. And then the deer took off running. I'm like, and now I'm ticked off because the cat's ruining my morning. So then I start like basically, I don't know, I guess you'd call it arguing with the cat. Well, then it ran around the tree and jumped on my head. So I'm like, my friends are never going to believe that I have a cat on my head. So I took a picture of it with my cell phone, and then I walked back out when I got done for the day. I walked back out. Cat followed me back to the truck, and then I went back to the tent. When I went back to the tent, I said to my buddies, "You're never gonna believe what happened to me today." I said I had a cat in the hat. They're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "I had a cat climb up the tree and it jumped on my head and it wouldn't get off my head." Then they're like, "Oh, you're full of shit. That never happened." Then I had the pictures and they're like, "Holy cow!" And so, moral of the story is, I guess if you're one with the animals, they'll be one with you.
That's awesome. I mean, I wonder, just a stray cat, huh?
Yeah. Well, I
I
think
had
what
a
somebody did is they dropped it off like on the side of the road because it was a parking spot, and they were probably hoping somebody would pick it up, and instead the cat, because the cat was friendly,
yeah,
and yeah, and it just followed me in, and we became buds.
I had a cat like that in college who just followed me around the block. Every time I'd go for a walk, he was just a few steps behind me the whole way, and he was kind of like a dog. And your story just reminded me of him. And then in Anticosti one time, I went hunting there. I had fox following me around all day. But yeah, they kind of follow you because they're trained to. They know there's going to be a gut pile
Oh yeah.
when and they'll follow you, wait for you to kill something, and then if they can't get to the ass of the animal, they'll go eat the gut pile.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so going back real quick to when you say you jump a deer multiple times out of the same area, you return to that area, and that's something I've been thinking about a lot too. They feel safe there, right? If you jump them multiple times and they escape without dying, it kind of reinforces to them that this is a good place to bed, right? They didn't die after you jumped them, so they know that that bedding area works. It is a great bedding area because they were able to get out without dying. So I feel like that is something I've just been thinking about a lot. A lot of people will say, "Oh, you keep jumping deer out of that spot. Don't go back there." Now they're going to go to different bedding areas. They're never going to come back to there, or it's going to be a period of time they're not going to come back. But do you feel like they that just reinforces to them that they chose a good bedding location?
I've argued with a lot of really I guess you'd call it successful hunters on this point, especially in the Midwest, because the Midwest is a lot smaller, tracts of land. Um, and like in the Midwest, a lot of people are like, "Oh, don't walk in that piece of woods. You jump the deer out of there. Don't walk through that thick crap that they're bedding in." I'm like, "I'll go walk through all of it. I don't care." And if I jump a deer out of that stuff, then I'll just go back there. And then they want to argue with me. Oh, you can only get away with kicking him out of there once or twice, and he'll never come back. I'm like, he lives there. He's lived there for a long time. He's a mature animal, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's kicked him out of there. And I mean, there are going to be people who are going to definitely disagree, but with the with the history that I've had, like I've seen where in reality with the either the deer I'm hunting are really dumb, or I'm in an area where it just doesn't matter because I've killed a lot of them after I jumped them out of the same area multiple times. And
Even
mature deer, it's
a
not. I
big
mean,
mature buck.
yeah, they're not little deer. I mean, so yeah, I mean, if they live there, they live there for a reason. I mean, and if you kick them out, they might go away for a couple days or whatever, but
Yeah.
they're to come back.
Yeah, they're just gonna go through that cycle. They're not gonna come back right away. It's not gonna be an hour later they're gonna come back in bed there. They're whatever way you kicked them, they have a few other bedding areas down there that they're familiar with, and they know that that scenario's happened to them before, and they just go to the next one,
Well,
but
here's an
they'll cycle
example.
cycle
One of
back.
my good buddies, he's like the luckiest guy I've ever hunted with, but he kills big deer all the time. So he one morning he calls me and he missed a really good deer. It was like coming down this ridge, and I don't know why I missed it with his gun. And he's like, "Well, I'm going right back there." I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." So he went back there that night, and the deer just returned the same exact way that it left after he shot at it. It came right back through the same way that evening, and he killed it. And it was a big 8 pointer. I mean, I think sometimes we just actually give deer
Yeah.
way too much credit. Deer are not smart animals, and people think they're smart. They're not. It's all intuition. Like wild animals live on like senses, and if like a gunshot sometimes is just a loud noise, an arrow is just a loud noise. They don't know what made
Oh
it.
yeah.
And but sometimes we try to outsmart ourselves, and I think that a lot of people are probably less successful than they could be because of that.
Yeah. Some people are terrified to get near a bedding area, or you know, as a bow hunter, wind is such an important thing that but I know even in the last couple of years, some of my close friends who've killed giant mature bucks with their bows, they killed them on a day that the wind wasn't their optimal ideal wind.
Yeah,
uh and if you are a super conservative hunter and you're afraid of that, they would have never gone into been in the location to kill the buck on those days. So I feel like you gotta have risk. You gotta be willing to take
I
risks.
do have a good wind story.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Years ago, I was hunting on top of this ridge. I had seen a lot of buck sign there, and it was right near the end of the season. And the wind was kind of blowing out of the north into the south, and there's a finger there. The deer, they kind of used both. It was both way traffic, and it was in the afternoon, and I could hear this deer coming, and I looked, and it's coming right up the finger, and the wind's blowing directly at it, and I'm going to shoot it because it's a pretty big deer. So I put the crosshairs on it and I just let it walk. And I'm like, I can't believe that deer's not smelling me because the wind was blowing right at it. There's no if, and, or but. So then I let him walk and walk and walk. And he got to 12 yards and I pulled the trigger and down he went. So I went over to the deer. And when he was laying there, the all of the fur and the skin and stuff on his nose was gone, and the bone in the nose was sticking out. He didn't have a nose.
Hmm.
and I don't. It wasn't shot off or anything. I don't really know what happened to it. I got the deer mounted, and it's got a huge scar, across the nose because the fur had to be sewn up there. But yeah, so there you go. Some deer can't smell, so you're all set.
That's interesting, man. That's crazy. Um, I feel like too, as a suburban hunter, when I'm getting most of my bow hunting has been in the suburbs here. You get away with a lot more than you would in big woods, but I feel like it's probably with the wind wise, right? Because they're used to smelling humans everywhere in the suburbs, and you
Well,
can't really.
I've often wondered that about that because I've seen some deer in the big woods and in like smaller parcels where they're like on edge, and other deer just don't give a shit. And
Yeah,
like sometimes I think big deer in big woods they've probably never seen or smelled a human, so they don't even really it doesn't really register that it's danger. Because I killed a fair amount of deer
it's a
that
good point.
walked right to me in the wind. Um,
Yep.
and so I've never been a big wind guy. I mean, of course, if you're going to hunt a food plot or something like that, like a meadow or whatever, I would probably recommend not sitting there if the wind's blowing into the woods when you're hunting a food plot. But when the animals are around people a lot, though, they're kind of used to the smell, and in my experience, your chances are a little bit better.
Like you just said, though, it's like yeah, I think I'm going back. We're going back to like giving the animal a little bit too much credit and trying to. You can't put all deer into one box. You can't generalize with them because they all have different personalities. In the suburbs, in the big woods, one could be super skittish. One could be very, just not nervous about your scent. Every deer is going to be completely different, and I think I always do it. You try to generalize, and you can do some generalization, but every scenario is going to have just a different personality of a deer may be different and may lead to you being able to kill a buck in a non-optimal situation, right?
Yeah, I like hunting the dumb ones, but I'm figuring most of the smart ones got away from me. But yeah, I
So
mean,
the dumb ones, they come back to scrapes, don't they?
yeah,
That's how you're
exactly.
killing all your big bucks.
Yeah, they don't know the difference. They go in there. It's kind of like probably like you when you were in college. You went into downtown Boston. You figured this is the bar where all the chicks hang out. That's where I go. I go to that bar and I just wait for them to the dumb ones to show up to get the chicks, and I shoot them. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. Like you said, every deer is a little bit different. I had a deer. I don't know. I chased it around for 4 years, and I had so many daylight pictures of this deer. Every picture is in the daylight, and I'm like,
Yep.
oh, I'm finally gonna kill him. I had it narrowed down. I'm like gonna kill him, and then I didn't kill him. And every place where I was, he wasn't, and where he was, I wasn't. So, and I never killed that deer, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if winter got him or whatever, but he just disappeared, and it's a deer that you would think you would kill because he's active nonstop in the daylight.
So a deer like that, you've got a lot of data on them. You were sure it was going to be the year you're going to get them, right? It brings me to something in your book that I was reading where you said that bucks will often come back and repeat, come back to the same location almost to the day or even to the day, um, year after year sometimes. So what do you attribute that to, and how many times have you seen that? And
That's what you can attribute it to is a lot of different things. Okay, like this year, this past season, my buddy and I knew we were going to kill a big buck on the 30th or the 31st of October. We had like 6 straight years of really big bucks in these two different spots. Like of the two spots, they were going to be in one spot. So we got what we needed. It was a cold morning and there was no wind. So I'm like,
were they the same big bucks that were going back to those spots, or
oh
just
yeah,
big bucks in general?
there was one like real giant deer, and he was in the same spot like 3 4 years in a row, and that but there were also multiple bucks in those areas. So I didn't really think about this till afterwards, but then anyhow we hunted. We knew we were going to kill the deer, and we we didn't go to the Midwest because normally we'd go to the Midwest, but we decided to hold up because we had never hunted it, even though we had all the pictures of the deer. So we decided we're going to put off the trip so we can hunt, and then we saw no deer. Well, then got thinking about it, and I think what happened is the reason the deer was in there every year, and the reason there were multiple bucks in there every year, is there was a doe in there every year that came into heat at that same time, and she must not have made it through the winter, and she
Yep.
wasn't there. So we took a guess. If we had guessed the year before, we probably done all right. But they the doe wasn't there, so it just didn't happen. So I mean that's one reason why a deer will show up in the same area like a lot, because there are does in there that are in heat and they come into heat about the same time every year. And
Oh,
then another reason is if it's a deer scrape and he's in there, he's just going to troll around to see if any, like any of those doe family groups are in, in his using his scrape and almost ready or whatever. So I mean, there are multiple different reasons why deer could show up in the same area. It might even be like a lot of deer, like I mean, they'll show up in one area to feed. Where if you have enough data, it's like they don't feed there earlier in the year, but then when you get to a certain
yep,
date, they all show up there.
yep.
So it's a little bit of everything. It goes back to that experience thing. If you're experienced enough, the problem is I think most people don't pay attention to what they're seeing, and they just as soon as it happens, they're done. I mean, but if you pay attention to a lot of little things without overthinking things, you'll probably be successful.
Yeah, that was it 2 year last year, 2021. I had noticed from the previous year that by having cameras in multiple locations, that deer were in the CRP type, you know, one of my CRP cameras that is essentially a sanctuary. You can't hunt in there. They're in there all summer long. They're growing. They've got all the browse in the world in there. They've got berries, and they're in there until mid September, even sometimes the first week of September, and then you see them all vacate and they don't come back. They don't come back for a while. And what I realized was going on was they're just moving over to, it was a good mast crop year and we had tons of acorns in the hardwoods, and they moved into the hardwoods. And I had that knowledge, and coupled that with this one buck I was looking at. He ended up being a 127-inch 8 pointer. He was in this area, and all of a sudden, the first week of September, rolls around. He's not there anymore, and I just know. So the opening weekend, where do I go? This like I'd be wasting my time hunting around that CRP anywhere in that area. I knew where they went the year before. Just move over into the hardwoods, and two things lined up. He walked by me and was able to kill him. But it's just using that knowledge again from previous years, and um, a lot of it is the seasonality of the food here. If you've got places like that, I know in the Adirondacks you don't, but
Well, I mean, southern Adirondacks has a lot of food because there are oak trees all over in southern Adirondacks, and I mean there are some places in the in the high peaks area that have oak, but not a lot of them. It's another thing. If you find an area where there is a lot of oak, then you're probably going to have deer with a little bit bigger antlers because there's better nutrition there.
let's go real quick and talk about, because you're hunting browse areas yourself mostly, right, in the
Yeah, yeah.
Adirondacks. And what does a browse area look like for someone who wants to go hunt the Adirondacks? It's not CRP. Is it bogs, the edges of
It's
swamps? What are you
it's
looking
uh,
for?
it's walk through the woods any place that you hunt, and you find browse any place. It's just plants and leaves and
There's
moss.
plenty. There's plenty in the Adirondacks. There's plenty
Oh
undergrowth
yeah,
and browse
yeah.
there.
Because I mean, it's not. I mean, I'm not familiar with where you hunt, but I mean, some places can get over browsed, like a wintering area, because they'll go in there and they'll, like, you'll see where all the trees. There's nothing on any of the trees, or there's no underbrush. I mean, about chest high, and it's because
Yeah.
all the deer have eaten that. Um, but yeah, where I hunt, I don't think three or four deer can do that much damage.
So you're not so finding a you're saying you're hunting the browse to find the deer, but you're really, that doesn't narrow down much.
Now,
You can
if you want to go look for deer, um,
yeah
basically go look for area. I mean, deer are just like us. You know, find food, water, and a place to sleep. And I'm
Yep.
going to find you if I find food, water, and a place to sleep, right? So deer are the same. They need
Sound
exactly what we do.
sounds like a swamp.
Yeah, well, it's any place really.
Yeah.
Food. I mean, yeah, the edge of swamps, the edge of lakes, in the Adirondacks, the edge of ponds. There are usually a lot of deer in those places. You know, because there's any place that's green is usually good. If there's any type of green, stuff in there, it's usually fairly nutritious, and they're going to be in there a lot. And water kind of offers them a little protection sometimes. And then it kind of also offers them a good chance to get killed if they're not paying attention. Like if you can like pinch them between a couple of places where they have no option but to go through, like either across a creek or across the end of a beaver flow.
Yep.
I mean those are all good places. And then of course, in the Adirondacks, I wouldn't really say. I mean, there are places where deer go back in bed. Like you'll find common areas where they bed, but for the most part, I've always noticed that deer kind of just walk till they're tired and lay down. I mean, I've seen them lay down in wide open hardwoods. Then I've seen them lay down, with their back up against, blowdowns and stuff. I've seen them a little bit every place. And it's not your typical, more like, I mean, in the Midwest, there are actually places where deer go bed because it's so thick, it offers cover and all that stuff.
Let's talk about so let's switch gears from Adirondacks and talk about scrape hunting because I
Sure.
love hunting scrapes too, and I want to hear everything that you've learned about from scrapes.
Learn if I sit there long enough between Halloween and the end of the first week of November, I'm probably going to shoot a deer.
And you're focusing on the big ones, right? Big community scrapes, a little.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, most people, I think, I'd say the majority of people, probably, I mean, probably not your listeners because your listeners are probably a little more educated. But the majority of people find a scrape and they think, "Oh, I found a deer scrape." And I'm looking for scrapes that are there every single year. Um, you can get fooled this way because in some areas where there's a lot of competition, you're going to find a lot of scrapes, and a lot of those scrapes will have licking branches, and you'll think, "Oh, this is a good one. It's here every year because it's got the licking branch." Well, that's not always the case. If there is a lot of competition and then multiple scrapes in there, it could be good, but from year to year, you kind of got to pay attention. In some areas, if you only find one or two of those, then I would say that that's probably a better bet than when you're finding piles of them, because
Hmm.
it kind of limits the options of the deer. Like either he made it or multiple deer visit it, and they're definitely coming back.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of picking your poison and doing your homework. And I try not to like burn out a spot. That's another thing too, is most people don't realize, like, if you listen to the vast majority of people who talk on it, they'll say, "Oh, you can't go back to this spot more than once," or blah blah blah. And it basically falls into I guess an umbrella, like you can't hunt someplace more than twice. Well, that's another thing that I'll test my limit with. And then I've learned over the years, some places can withstand pressure and some places can't. And you have to know where the place is that can withstand the pressure and where won't it, and how long will it withstand pressure if it won't withstand pressure. Like in my experiences, places that don't withstand pressure, you have about 2 days and a half, because you might have a lot of like good mature deer in the Midwest in a scrape for 2.5 days, and then if you go back that third day, you're done. You're toast. So I mean, if you don't get it done in that first day, day and a half, then maybe you just give it a break and then go back like 3, 4 days later.
What are you finding that's the major difference between a place that can withstand pressure and that can't?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing. It's
No,
just
some places withstand the pressure and some places don't, and it's a matter of you figuring it out before it's too late. The places that can withstand all sorts of pressure are the places that I try to focus on because granted, I mean, usually if you're hunting places like that, the places that can't withstand pressure, you're going to kill the deer within a, one or two sits.
Yeah.
But those other places, like if I know there's a big deer in one of those other places, I'll sit there till I see him because I know he's coming back. I think you might have read about that in the book. Like I had all the pictures of that one deer, and I said I could have killed this deer. Blah blah. Well, I didn't. I don't think I wrote it in the book, but I I saw that deer. I could have killed that deer. Um, you know what I mean? Because he just kept on coming back, and in that area was fairly heavily pressured. Um, so it goes back to like the personality thing. Um,
Yeah.
like you might walk through the streets of Boston after dark. Well, I'm from the Adirondacks. I'm not going to do that. So you and I are two different bucks. You know.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's kind of the
Yep.
same type of thing. Like he might just feel brave and like I'm the badass here. I can do whatever I want. And another thing I've kind of noticed, like in the Adirondacks, I think sometimes as deer get older, people have always said, "Oh, it's harder and harder to kill a deer the older it gets." I think sometimes as deer get older, they get easier to kill. Like you can't kill him when he's like 3.5 or 4.5, but then at like 6.5, he just gets up and he walks right past you. And
Well,
I think sometimes they just feel brave. They're like, "Oh, I've done this forever. I can do this today." But I mean, who knows? They
yeah.
don't think like us. So that's just me pretending I'm a deer, and I'm not a deer. So who knows?
And maybe they just, as you get older, you get stuck in your ways and you just get, more stubborn
Yeah.
and he's just, when he's 3, he's got all the piss and vinegar in him and he wants to go look for fights and run the town and
Well,
then
I
he
compare it to
gets
like driving on the highway. Okay, you drive down the highway and you're like, well, I'm going to keep going 85 because I haven't got a ticket. Well, then you're going to get a ticket eventually. And if you don't have a get out of jail free card, you're in trouble. So, and I think that that's them. They just, they're like, I've been speeding here forever. I can get away with it.
and then keep on that analogy and going back to the bar analogy, right? Where you've got you've got a couple of bars and this will tie into the scrapes. Those areas where you have maybe two major big scrapes as opposed to one that's got piles of them. That's basically like going into a town that's got two bars versus going into a city where there's bars everywhere and ladies crawling everywhere, right? If you're looking, it's going to be much easier to get an inventory on the entire town in those small places with only 2 bars, right? Than a
Yeah.
town that's got
Well,
25.
the weird thing about those places, it's easier to get an inventory on what's there, but
Yep.
those places are going to have more probably random deer show up at different times, like throughout I guess you would call it the rut, when they're visiting scrapes.
Yep.
Whereas those other places probably aren't gonna they're not gonna get a lot of like interlopers in my experience. Like those other places have a bunch of deer that live there and they're all fighting amongst each other, and that's why all those scrapes are there. They all think they're the badass in the area. So
Yep.
then you have a zillion scrapes in there because there's so much competition. Where
Mhm.
those other areas, I've seen more deer that just kind of show up that I didn't know were there.
Which can be a good thing or a bad thing,
Yeah.
right? Well, I don't know if it would be bad, but if you're trying to hunt one particular deer,
Well, I'm not bashful. I'll shoot the other deer if I'm not if I see another good deer, then I'm not gonna wait for that one.
if he's a good one.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so all right, let's stick with the scrape theme because I love scrapes. I think anybody who's getting into hunting and wants to learn a lot, the scrape is the great place to start. You can learn a whole shit ton by a scrape, and they put a camera. I like putting cameras on scrapes. And then reading your book talking about wide load? Is
Yeah,
that the name
yeah,
of it?
yeah,
And he came into a scrape after rain, and it's another. I love hunting the rain and right after the rain too. It's something I've been
yeah. The
doing.
rain. I
So
mean,
let's.
the rain is it. It all depends on the area and the timing. But like, I've killed a lot of deer like after torrential downpour
Yep.
within an hour of a torrential downpour. So, and they're coming to those scrapes to just rip them apart. And the problem is, most people think, I'm going to sit on the couch here, and when the rain stops, I'm going out. Well,
Yeah.
that's not the way it works. Go sit your ass in the tree when it's pouring down rain, and
Yep.
and granted, 9 out of 10 times you might not see anything, but it only takes once. And I'm not a fair weather hunter. I'm a little, I guess you call it a little slow, and I'll go out there all day in crappy weather.
Me too. I love it. You can't get wetter than wet. Once you're soaked from head to toe, you can't get any wetter than that.
I
So
kind of think back to when I was a kid. I don't know, even probably through my 30s. I never used rain gear, and I'm like, then when I got it, I'm like, wow, this stuff's awesome. I can stay partly dry.
I like to I get soaked and then I tell myself, yeah, it sucks in the beginning, but after an hour of being completely soaked, you just forget about it and it almost makes whatever happens after that so much more rewarding if you
Oh yeah,
suffered through some stuff, you know?
I've always noticed too. I mean, big deer tend to, in my experience, big deer tend to move on crappy days, and of course, I don't know if it's because maybe they feel a little bit safer. Um, Maybe I don't know. They, of course, they don't think like us, but I'd say their instincts tell them that it's less likely they're going to run into a predator
Yep.
of the human nature on those days.
Yep. Exactly. Um All right, so but with wide load, right? This was this touches on a couple of things we were talking about. You found a great funnel. You said the best funnel you probably ever came across, and that's why you set up in that area. And that was a day after a torrential downpour, right? Or was it the
Yeah, it
morning
was a
of?
day. It had rained all day, and that was in the. I think I was there in the evening, if I remember right.
Yep. Um, so what was that funnel that you came up on it, and can you describe that for people and where you were
Oh,
hunting Ohio or?
yeah, I don't know
Yep.
anybody who's ever hunted Ohio. I mean, there are huge ravines there, and this was kind of like where, like a long, steep hill ran into a sloping hill, and there was like a old coal deposit up on the sloping hill that kind of had a bunch of brush and stuff in it. I mean, there was a lot of sign in there, and then it came down to a little flat where there was a ditch down in front of me, like a kind of like a hollowed out ditch, maybe 20 yards wide. And then there was a really steep ditch that ran into that. And the deer had to come down. There were only two places they could cross either ditch. So, I mean, it was blatantly obvious, where they had to cross. So I just set up so I could shoot both places. And then there was a giant scrape right on the other side of one ditch. So I sat right there. And then I commenced to shoot underneath the deer.
The widest deer you've ever seen in your life,
Yeah,
right? Just
yeah.
not to add insult to
I
injury, right?
wanted to
But
jump out of the tree and hang myself afterward. Because I mean, after I shot, he ran up the hill, and I mean, there was no shooting then. I just watched him. I think he was standing over there flipping me the bird, but
but you've ended up going back there and killing a deer
yeah, I killed a really good deer there. I
in that
killed
same
two deer
spot.
there. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's just one of those spots. Like I mean, a lot of times people don't actually know what a funnel is. I've even heard people on podcasts talk about funnels, and they don't even really know what a funnel is. But they just regurgitate information that other people have said, and that, they think it's cool. But I mean, this here, the deer has no option. It can't possibly go anyplace else. If it's gonna come from one side to the other, it has to go through one of those two ditches, and because the ditch is too wide and too steep, where it can't jump across the ditch, and it can't go down in it because it's too sheer of a cliff almost. So what they did is, over the years, I mean, the deer had basically hollowed out the two different runways to get across the ditch. And if you find something like that, it's during the rut, there's no possible way you can go wrong. And then on top of that, there were a couple giant scrapes there. And I'm like, it. If you see something like that, it's almost like I guess you'd call it a kill spot.
I was gonna say almost like that type of a funnel, like when you have that perfect funnel scenario, you're going to find a community scrape there most likely every time you find that type of funnel if there's deer around anyway, right? At that pinch point, that's a perfect place for all the deer in the area to be able to communicate with each other.
Yeah, you'll. I mean, you should see a lot of deer there if you're in an area where there are a lot of deer. Um, and there were a lot of deer in that area. Um, but then it all comes down to luck and timing too. Because I had another buddy sit there, and because I sat him there afterwards, and he never saw a deer, but I don't. He might have been sleeping in the tree. I I have no idea.
Or maybe it's what with the buck that you ended up killing there. You killed a few. There, did you go back there after rain? Now that you know, like you were there that one time.
No, no, because you want to know what? Like I don't. Um, there was there was never really like that scrape was really active then, and that the big deer was like he was
Yeah,
really in there. So like I knew that that's where I go to wherever my odds are the highest. Like it's kind of it's kind of like when you buy a 50-50 lottery ticket and you throw your thing in there and like you're never going to win. But then you fold over the end and then your buddy pulls yours because he saw that it was folded over. It's kind of like that, like it's almost like you're cheating because you know the days that they're going to come. And so I'll go to wherever I'm going to win the 50-50 lottery.
that makes sense. And let's say whenever there's a torrential downpour happening or in the forecast, you automatically do you pull up maps and you go, all right, or you just know because of all your scouting, but
No,
where are my best primary scrapes? And
no,
then
it all depends on where I am and what has been going on where I am.
yep.
Because I'm not going to go back to a place that has a primary scrape there if I really haven't been seeing a lot of deer there. Um, I'm going to go to wherever I think my odds are the highest. It's kind of and you like I can't tell you this is why I go here. That's why I go there. It goes back to that intuition thing. I'm going to go with my gut because this is the place that I feel I can kill the deer. And it might not even be, it might go back to that whole thing. I might go to the spot that doesn't even have that scrape there. It might have a smaller scrape. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
just because it has the most activity, who knows? I might have blown deer out of there, like just earlier in the morning or something before it started pouring, and then now I'm like, I'm not going to go back there. I'm going to go over here because I think it's a little bit better.
Yep. Yeah.
Sometimes you'll find sometimes you'll find an area like that. It has the scrapes, okay, and it's probably the best scrape in the area. But then another, say, 200, 300 yards away, you have the same deer that work it, but it's a different scrape. So on another day, that other scrape might be better because most of your big deer are going to hit a whole bunch of different scrapes in an area. And as long as you know that, like they might come to one scrape once and they might come to another scrape in the same area 3 times. And then they might go to another one 5 times. And they might just go to each one twice. So it's kind of knowing, which one do I go to? Where are my odds the highest today?
Hypothetically, if you've got a cell camera, I don't know what your views are on cell cams or if you've ever used one, but you got one that'll send you pictures so you don't have to go in to check the camera, right? If you've got a cell camera on five your five best primary scrapes, community scrapes, and so you basically have real time knowledge, and all right, well, scrape A is getting hit the most. It's the most active out of all of my top five scrapes. And then there's a torrential downpour. Do you go to hunt scrape A because you know it's the most active and you have that real time
Well,
data?
it all depends. I mean, because scrape A could be at the end of the scrape activity. That might be why they were all there. There could have been a hot doe there.
Yep.
And then you might have scrape B who doesn't have a picture on it yet, but there's a giant deer in there.
Hmm.
It goes back to that whole thing. Like, granted, it's hypothetical, so yeah, I'd probably go to the one that has all the action, but I don't know. I wouldn't know until I was in the position. Um,
Yeah.
it like
Can you?
two years ago, I had a giant deer on a cell camera, and it was before daylight, and it was in a scrape area, And I said to my buddy, because he had blisters on the back of his feet, and it was a long walk, I don't know, a couple miles or whatever. I said, "You go down in that bottom, and you'll kill that deer this morning." He didn't go down there, and then shortly after daylight, the deer walked right by the camera again. And I'm like, "I told you."
Yeah.
So, and then and he's bitching the whole time. I'm like, "I told you he was coming back."
You got to suffer. You got to push through those blisters, man.
Yeah. Well, they were in his defense. They were pretty bad. He went hunting with never having worn the new boots, and no break in, and he did it to himself, and so yeah. So now we call that place Blister Bottom.
Now, I've got a buddy, a hunting buddy. I do want to touch on hunting buddies too. Some stuff that I read in your book. But I've got a hunting buddy who's he doesn't have nearly as good an excuse as your buddy did. But this was in like probably my hottest stand location last year. I had a cell cam right on a scrape. I had just found this spot last year, but I shared it with this buddy. I trust him, and I'm one of those guys. It's like if I'm not hunting it, I happened to be in Vermont hunting that weekend, and my buddy was like, "Hey, you mind if I sit that stand?" I'm like, "No, absolutely not." And it's been hot. The scrape's been hot. I think it was November 4th. And I was like, yeah, just get going. He's like, all right, I'm going in tomorrow morning. I'm like, perfect. So I'm in Vermont hunting, and I get a picture texted to me at 7:15 a.m. of a nice 8 pointer standing in that scrape where I knew he was going to be. So I was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to get real time pictures of like an arrow going through or something. And that buck stayed in that scrape for 11 minutes. He was there. I was getting pictures for 11 minutes straight. And I texted him. I'm like, dude, what's going on? Why haven't you shot that buck? He's like, oh, I slept in. His excuse was just sleeping in. He's like, I'm going to go in the evening. It was like, dude, if you would have just been there.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about hunting buddies and how important that is to find somebody who matches your style, and also to trust people, because in your book, I read basically what equates to spot stealers, right? You had some guys that you thought you could trust, and eventually, they break that unwritten code of, hey, you put in all this effort to find a spot. You allowed them and invited them to come hunt the spot with you, with the unwritten knowledge and the code, right? Where it's like, I'm not going to go back to that spot unless you are there or I get permission from you. And then it ended up what, biting you in the butt two different times, right?
Yeah, I mean, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Uh, I I can't say I'll never bring anybody again because I brought somebody again this year, but it's somebody who comes from the same background as me. Like I like to give people opportunities that don't have the opportunities that I've been, basically awarded in my life. So the first time somebody did, I moved into a new house, and this guy did a lot of work for me, around the yard, stuff like that. He helped me a lot. So I knew his reputation. I brought him with me. And then he killed a deer on posted land, and it jeopardized all of us being able to hunt because we had to go on the posted land and get the deer. And it just was awkward. And then the next year, he was out there with a bunch of his friends, and then it just snowballed from there. And in hindsight, it was probably good for me because it opened doors to other places that I probably never would have gone.
Hmm.
And then I've killed a lot better deer since then. Um, but it really comes down to who has the same values as you. Um, you have to hunt with people who don't care who kills the deer. They celebrate your deer, their deer, somebody else's deer, all the same.
Yep.
And like if we kill one deer, we all killed it. Um,
Yep.
in our particular group, I get a lot of credit because I'm a little bit more visible than most. Um, but I'm probably the worst hunter of anybody in our group. But I get the most credit. Um, and a lot of that is because my friends help me. Like just as an example, like one of my better buddies there, he had killed a deer early in the trip, and then Actually, his deer got stolen at the butcher's, but that's another story. But and
Jeez.
it was a really big deer. But so anyhow, he kind of tooled around looking for a better spot for me. And he had some cameras here and there, and he's like, "Listen, this big 10 pointer keeps showing up in the same place every night." Well, I think there were five of us, and he told my other two buddies, and they're like, I'm not going over there. I'm like, screw that, I'm going there. Where is it? So he told
Yeah.
me where it was, and it was like, I don't know, it was like 45 minutes from where our tent was. So got in the car, went the next day. It was like crappy out, like roads were all ice, and I got in there. It got daylight. I heard something behind me. I turned around, and it's that 10 pointer. He's coming right down. He stood next to me, and I shot him. I had nothing to do with killing the deer. I just pulled the trigger on the release, and the arrow went through it. So you if you have friends like that, it's really good because I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I've done the same thing for my friends, my dad, and stuff like that. It just all one hand washes the other,
Yeah.
and celebrate in everybody's success and failures.
Yep. Yeah, it's like it goes back to the whole networking thing, how important networking is not only in your life, but it can be extremely important in hunting and the sharing of knowledge and kind of being a detective a little bit. I feel like there's a lot of that in you, and I want to touch upon, you know, the whole networking, being a detective, getting tips from people, how to kind of use all of the knowledge that's available to us to find spots out there. And I want to touch on all that, but just a couple of announcements as we kind of we're at an hour and 15 minutes here. We've got a little bit more to talk on hunting, but um, going to your um, competition archery side for a second, I wanted to pick your brain. I don't know if I had told you about it yet, but we're doing a 3D shoot at the Springfield Sportsman Show in Western Massachusetts, February 24th through the 26th, and we kind of partnered up with the Air Force on this. And I know it's just a different world. I don't know the world of IBO and the competition, that whole
Yeah.
competition archery side of things. And I think that that might be a benefit, because I'm going into this kind of world with a fresh set of eyes, and I'm not afraid to kind of take a little chance. So what do you think about? I always have this vision of like turning archery more into a an athletic competition that doesn't require requires the mental fortitude and all that, but then adding physical elements to it. So what we're doing is a three zone shoot, super basic and easy, a 10-yard shot into a 3D target, um, two arrows into it, and then you got to do a jet sled push and pull that's supposed to simulate dragging a deer. This is just inside a conference center, so it's not in future iterations. I want to like expand upon this and make it like a long drag and make it a little bit more physically demanding. This is a 15-yard push and a 15-yard pull back, but it will elevate your heart rate enough that makes your final zone 3 two shots into a 3D target from 18 yards. It'll make it a little bit more difficult because you just did some physical exertion on the sled drag. So that's it. It's a 90-second shoot, and I'm hoping that people are going to come and test it out and just kind of give me a bunch of feedback on, is it something that they could see expanding and being, maybe being a new whole sport in competition archery. And I just want to get your thoughts on that as an archer.
I'm gonna guess you're not gonna have very much luck.
Why is that?
I mean, I wish you luck. Number one, because when people learn archery, when they're
Yep.
taught archery, one of the biggest selling points for archery, anybody can do it.
Yep.
So you've just eliminated a lot of people who are probably not in good shape. You've eliminated any target archer. Um, you've eliminated any guy who doesn't want to do any physical work.
Yep.
You've eliminated all kids, and kids are your future. Um,
Why would kids be eliminated?
because, like, I mean, is a kid going to be able to, push a sled back and forth?
Well, for like kids, we wouldn't put any weight in there, for instance, right?
Yeah.
We want it to be fun, but also we want there to be a competitive part for people who want to be competitive. Like you could sign up
Yeah.
as competitive, or you sign up as just doing it
And
for
another
fun.
thing too, like people, like you're not going to get anybody travel any distance to shoot something for 90 seconds.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Yeah,
You know what I mean? So that's the thing. Like it all depends. I mean, yeah, it might work, like for what you want it to work for. But like as far as like if you want to build on that and grow like archery to make money off it, you'll never do it that way.
yeah. No, I don't look at anything ever to how am I going to do it to make money off of it. It's if you have a passion or if you have a vision on something and a passion, and I'm a creative person, I just always my brain can't get shut off.
Yeah,
It's a creative, constantly
yeah.
turning and coming up with a million new ideas at the same time. But when I focus on something and I want to see it come to fruition, then I'll be fixated on that. I just want to see what's going to happen, and with the 3D archery thing, like I eventually do see it being, imagine a regular 3D archery course that's 20, 25, 30 targets. At Hunt Stock, we do 20 targets because we just want to be different. And people don't really want to be out shooting a 3 hour, 4 hour course when there's all this awesome programming going on at Hunt Stock and
Yeah.
seminars and all the stuff you could be doing in the festival. So we shorten the course. But I can eventually see it in between the shots. You have something that you're doing that's related to hunting. You
You
might
want
have
to
to
know?
walk.
I mean, you want to know how you? I mean, if as far as the hunt stock thing goes, like in the South, are you familiar with the Buckmasters Championship?
Nope.
The Buckmasters Championship is monstrous, and that was designed in a show kind of like Hunt Stock. It was
Yep.
designed for like the Buckmasters show, and what they are is pop up targets. And so you're all in one spot, and then you shoot X number of pop up targets. Where the target comes up, you have to identify. Like if two targets pop up, you're like, oh, can't shoot that one. It's a doe. I got to shoot that one. It's a buck. And then some of them are moving, some of them aren't moving. And then when you shoot, if you hit it in the kill zone, the deer just falls over. And
Wow.
then at the end, they have the Buckmasters champion. It used to be huge. A lot of professionals shot in it. Like that, you could make that really big, and it's all hunting oriented. Like I mean, if I were doing what you're doing, um, that like the Buckmasters archery part of the show drew a lot of people on top of the show. You know
Yep.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I
Yeah.
were
I'll.
you, just do a little research on that.
Yeah, I will. That sounds awesome. Yeah, and that's kind of why the 3D archery thing at the Springfield show. I know people aren't going to travel to do a 90-second shot, but we're kind of piggybacking off of there's going to be a whole bunch of people who are going to the show who are already bow hunters, and if we can get the word out ahead of time, maybe you can get them. They're already going, they're not traveling there specifically for this shoot, but this is just a something within the show that they can do for fun, bring their bow if they want. So they're not adding any travel to their schedule, right? They're just literally
Yeah,
showing up with a bow. And we've got like $5,000 worth of door prizes committed, so that anybody who shoots it, you get entered into the door prizes. We're probably only going to get 300 shooters or less, so you get really good chances to win some cool stuff, hunting related, archery related. So in the future, like in the beginning iterations of this, I think we would bring it to shows that already have a population of people going to them, right? And then you draw on the experience from all that and then build it into something that people want to travel to, which will be a longer course and not 90 seconds, right?
yeah.
So,
I mean, there's another thing called the Great Outdoor Games, which I'd imagine you're too young to remember. Um, and that was
yeah,
in Lake Placid, and that was a bunch of like novelty moving type targets. See, the biggest thing about these things is you can do them like in house wherever you are. You don't need anything to do it. Like, and people aren't wasting a lot of time because it happens so fast. Um,
yeah,
but people would be more likely, I think, to do the like those two things I just mentioned than they would. Like, I'm not saying your idea is bad, but as far, I mean, I'm
yeah,
involved in a lot of archery things, and I think it would. I just don't know if you would get the draw that you know like if I were doing your thing, I'd want the most people there, no matter how I could get them there,
yeah,
because then it promotes your business,
yep,
and you use another outlet to, it's basically like networking. You're going into another network to gain more people.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that's why this thing, I mean, it's free. It's not like it's not, you just gotta, you pay for your ticket entry to get into the show, right? But it doesn't cost anything to shoot it. It's
Yeah.
free to do. It's 90 seconds. It could be fun. You could win a whole bunch of prizes. And for people who don't want to shoot either, we've got, you could throw out a cornhole board. So you still go through the thing where you're, instead of shooting an arrow, you're throwing at a cornhole board, and you're participating in something. You still have to do that little sled push and sled pull, and then you're throwing at a cornhole board instead of the arrow. So we don't want to turn anybody away. We want as many people to kind of be a part of it, and get entered into the door prizes anyway. And but I do want it to eventually be like competitive archery and
Yeah. I mean,
a new look of
another
it.
thing too, as far as like competitive archery, like I'll be the first to tell you, like you don't need anybody pushing no sled to get their heart rate up because competitive archery automatically raises your heart rate
Yeah.
if
Yep.
you're competing, you know, at anything that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, the sled isn't really to get your heart rate up so much as it is to introduce something that hasn't been done
Gotcha.
in in archery before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want to do something completely different.
Yeah.
And weeding out people who aren't in shape enough to do that is perfectly fine, right? That creates a whole new subset. It creates a different athlete, that
Sorry, fat guy, you can't do that.
or you can, as long as you can have a short burst, you can, as long as long as you can do a 100-yard sprint, right?
Better get the ambulance there.
Oh yeah. Yep.
uh,
But cool. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that as
that's
somebody
another
who's
thing too. Is
in.
I don't know if you're familiar, but I'm the New York State IBO director. So
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the IBO is bow hunting's NRA, and most people don't know that. Like all the IBO money, it's a non for profit, and all the money goes to supporting your rights to bow hunting in all the battles faced across the country.
Yep.
And most people don't know that.
No, I didn't. I thought IBO, it was basically competitive archers and not, really for the bow hunting archer.
No,
It was like,
IBO is the only reason that they do any of the competitive stuff is
mhm,
to raise more money for the defense of bow hunting. So like regional IBO qualifiers,
yep,
every shooter that the host site gets, they have to give $5 to the IBO if it's IBO sanctioned, and then that $5 goes towards. Like they just had a big thing a couple of years ago where they put a lot of money towards like something going on with bear hunting in Maine, and they do it all over the country. So that's the biggest thing. Like people like you, like most people think, oh, IBO, it's competitive archery, and
yep,
it's so much more. It's so much deeper than that, um, and that's why I've always been involved with that. And that's just why I support it because down the road, like who's to say? Like you're a suburban hunter, like who's to say they outlaw bows in in like townships or whatever? Well, the IBO would go to bat and fight for you.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of towns in Massachusetts where you can't
Yeah,
even discharge a bow.
yeah. So
Forget
I
forget
mean,
a gun. So
that's and stuff like that. I mean, if you bring it up to the IBO and contact the office or whatever, I mean, it's all stuff like that that they battle all the time.
cool. That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I appreciate it. I don't want to spend too much time on the 3D archery because I think most people tuning in are going to want to hear about your hunting strategies. But I did want to just get your thoughts on that,
sure.
and I appreciate it. Um, all right, so let's go back to being a detective. I feel like you are when it comes to finding hunting spots, you're somewhat of a detective, whether it's crawling forums and seeing what people are talking about on the forums and the places that they can hunt, and looking at record books and finding where the biggest bucks in a particular area you might want to go hunt. What counties are they coming from, and kind of piecing together the puzzle that way. Can you talk to me about kind of how you would boil that down to where you can hone in, how you could hone in on a new spot to find big bucks just through
I'll just give
what
you an
the
example.
the
I
tools
I
available.
I was looking for a new place to hunt in the Midwest a couple years ago, and I had a general idea where I wanted to go, but I wasn't sure. I was looking at a bunch of maps and stuff, and as I was looking through the maps one day, I happened to be, I don't know what I was on, like one of those hunting, I don't know, hunting pages on the internet, or in on Facebook actually.
Yep.
And this guy, I think it was like post your, might have been like deer hunts of America or something. I can't remember what it was. But this guy posted a picture up and said, "Oh, I killed this deer, blah blah blah," and he was bragging about it. And he says, "I killed this with my bow and this with my gun." And he had the two pictures of the deer, and I looked at it, and then I looked at his name, and I clicked on his profile, and I saw, holy cow, he's from that town that I've been looking at. So I just sent him a message, and I said, "Hey, I see you're from this town. I've never been out there hunting this year, but I'm headed out that way this year. Is there anything you could tell me, like places to stay, places to avoid? Where can I get something to eat? All that stuff." Well, he opened up to me. He put me on two places, and he didn't, he just kind of told me two different roads to look at. And then I went in there, and I killed a really big 10 pointer there. So, and then and then after I got out there, I met a bunch of other people, and if you're nice to people, people will be nice to you. The best place to hang out is a diner. So if you have if you have one of your guys in your group that, like, maybe he's not as motivated as you should go check out all the places that you checked out on the map, and then he should go sit in the diner. And so, and then I mean, like, there's a Walmart almost every place you go. I mean, within an hour.
Yep.
Go to Walmart and talk to the people working in Walmart. Because one year I was hunting in Ohio, and then the guy at the sports counter says to me, "Oh yeah, you can go right out here behind the parking lot." He says it's public land just beyond the parking lot right there. He says, "Oh, big bucks come out there every day." I'm like, "Oh, okay, thanks." So I mean, it happens in unlikely ways, um, but you have to be open minded, and you have to know that you're going to get bullshitted a little bit too. But I mean,
Misdirected.
some people are I mean, they have pretty good hearts. Um, and another thing in the Midwest versus back here, like back here, you can come to your car and have all your tires slashed when you get out of the woods. Out there, I mean, people are a little bit different, a little more friendly. I found, uh, and they want you to succeed for the most part. I mean, there are some places where they can't stand non-residents, but at the same time, I mean, if you find the right people, then you know they help you, you help them, and some good friendships are formed.
What kind of play? What place comes to mind is that can't stand the non-residents the most to you?
Every state. Yeah, no, honestly, there. No matter where you go, there's places that can't stand non-residents. I
Yeah.
mean, Iowa. I've hunted Iowa a few times. Iowa is the most overrated place as far as what you're told, because in Iowa there's more pressure than you'll find almost any place, and there didn't used to be, but there is now because every single YouTube show says go hunt public land in Iowa.
Yeah.
I hunted Iowa a couple times. I never saw a non-resident plate. Then the last time I saw hunted Iowa, I saw non-resident plates every place I went, and they're hunting public land. In the
Yep.
old days, people would, they'd save their points and then they'd hire an outfitter or they'd lease land. Um, in locals in Iowa, the locals I've met, a lot of them do not like non-residents, because I mean, the in Iowa, the public land is so small, like it's just not very big.
Yeah.
And when you get a bunch of non-residents on land that other guys, locals, that's the only place they can hunt. I mean, it just gets overwhelmed with people, and then a lot of people can't go home without shooting a deer, and then you have people shooting all sorts of deer that that normally in the past probably wouldn't have gotten shot.
Yeah.
So I would say probably Iowa is probably the worst as far as disliking non-residents.
Yeah. Oh, I can understand that too. It's just a different world. Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, we don't have everybody coming from all over the place. So it's, you know, we're not
Well,
we're not we're not dealing with that yet.
as far as local goes, I mean, most people I know can't stand Vermonters. Like
And
when you see a Vermont plate in the Adirondacks, it's like, oh my God, there's a Vermonter here.
it's like,
And
oh no, there's another really good hunter
yeah,
around.
no,
Because Vermont,
usually it's more like, oh, there's a Vermonter. They shoot anything that moves. Yeah, like I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you get like pigeonholed into a group of maybe
yeah,
somebody knows one Vermonter that did that. And now every Vermonter does it.
yep,
You know what I mean?
yep.
It's unfortunate, but that happens.
I feel like it's being a Vermonter. It's like the skiing analogy where people who ski or snowboard, you grow up doing it in Vermont where you've got terrible conditions, but you get good at it there. Then you can go to Colorado and ski the powder no problem. And it's Vermont's one of the toughest places in the nation to hunt and kill a buck, especially a mature buck.
Yeah.
Um, so if you can get good and shoot deer in Vermont, you can go anywhere and probably be up to
Well,
par with most of the hunters in that area. I feel
that's what I tell people too. I mean, if you can kill a deer in the Adirondacks, like mature deer regularly, you can go any place in the country and kill mature deer. It's not, it to be honest, it's a lot easier to find deer in other places than it is here. And if you made a living out of finding deer here, then you can find them anywhere.
Okay, so that kind of brings me to the point where and you run into this in hunting. There's all kinds of subclasses of hunters, right, or subgroups, and infighting group versus group, right? Gun hunters versus bow hunters, or a tracker versus a stand hunter, and it's like, no, I'm better than you, or I'm better than you,
No,
and that all of that stuff is just a bunch of BS. I feel like, but one thing that I hear a lot is guys who hunt. Bigger woods, saying that it's so much easier to kill a big buck in the suburbs than it is in the big woods, right? Or, oh, he's hunting a dumpster deer, you hear sometimes, like as a suburban hunter. And then I read in your book too, where it's not like it's easier to kill a big buck in the Midwest. Although a lot of people, when you first started going out there, right, they're like, "Oh, you're just going out there to kill an easy buck." So, how do you feel about you know, is it's easier to locate a big buck or get into some bigger bucks, but how do you kind of play that against each other? Is it easier to kill a big buck in the
no.
Midwest?
I mean, you would have to define easier. Uh, it's easier in the sense that there are more mature deer. So you have a greater chance to see more mature deer, and where you see more mature deer, your odds are gonna go up.
Yep.
But like honestly, like my success level on mature deer is the same whether I'm in the Adirondacks or the Midwest. So is one place easier than the other?
Yeah.
You
Right.
know what I'm saying?
It's yeah.
And like you're a suburban hunter. I've also hunted suburban Long Island, and it's the same thing. Like I mean, you still got to do your homework to shoot a big deer. Like I mean, big deer don't just run down the trail and step in front of you and say, "Oh, here I am, shoot me." I mean, you got to kind of know what you're doing there too. You got to have access to the right pieces of land. Um, you know what I mean? And you have to know what you're doing. I mean, you're not. You could go sit in your backyard and see nothing, but then you could go sit in the guy's house three houses down from you, and that's the place to be. And somebody
Right.
else might not know that. So you kind of become an expert at what you do. And the thing is, you have too many people. Like a lot of big woods hunters, all they do is hunt big woods. They're like, oh, well, if I went out there, I'd be killing big deer like him too. Well, have at it. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
all entitled to do whatever we want to do. So
Yeah.
instead of casting stones at glass houses, go try it. See,
Yeah.
let's see what you got.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Because it's not like I brought somebody with me this year, and he's like, I can't believe. He says, whenever you came home with deer, he says, I used to think it was really easy. He says, this is not easy. And because I mean, the pressure is ungodly. And the pressure has only increased since all of the hunting public stuff. So like they're like, oh, go hunt public land. I can remember when I first started, you were a dirtbag if you hunted public land because you had no place else to hunt. Oh, look at him, he hunts public land. Now all these guys on the internet are trying to be superstars. Oh, look at me, I hunt public land. They beat their chest. And
Yeah.
like I'm almost tempted to try finding private land, even though I've never done it now, just because it's every place is overwhelmed with
Yeah.
public land hunters.
Yep. Yeah, it's almost like private land now, it becomes everything goes into swings, right?
Oh yeah,
Where the private land everybody was hunting on for a long time, and the public land hunters who were fewer and farther between were hunting the outskirts of there and having a great. And but now it's almost the other way. The pressure from public is pushing deer more and more into the private pockets.
it's kind of how you introduce this like segment here too. Is you said, yeah, it's often thought that if you don't track deer in the big woods, then you're not going to get any deer. You're not going to see any deer. To be honest, that's the reason that I wrote the first book I wrote, because every single seminar I ever went to or any person I ever listened to, I can hear all of them saying, "You'll never consistently kill big deer if you're a sitter in big woods." And I'm like, okay, I can call bullshit on this one. So, I mean, I choose to do it a different way, but I can still do it their way. I mean, but I don't say their way is easier or harder. It's
Yeah.
when you're following a deer on snow, I mean, you're following its tracks. I mean, if you have enough determination and you know when to be slow, know when to be fast, then maybe you'll catch up to it. It's the
Yep.
same thing with me when I'm sitting someplace. Maybe I'll get lucky enough to have done enough homework so I know that's the day I got to be there. And it goes back to that whole thing, like don't put down other people for the way they hunt. You have the same toolbox. So if you want to use a wrench, use a wrench. If you want to use a screwdriver, use a screwdriver.
Yeah.
And and if you think that what the other guy does is so hard or so easy, go try it his way.
Yep.
Because I do the things that I enjoy. And although I've tracked deer and still hunted and all that stuff, like I don't enjoy tramping through the woods all day. I would rather find a deer and say, "Can I kill this deer that he's lived here a long time. This is his main area. Can I kill him?" And then I know that I basically probably outsmarted him or I got really lucky. If I'm tracking him, then I'm simply tracking him. And I might learn a little bit about him along the way, but I'm outsmarting him in the fact that I caught up to him, because I avoided him detecting me. But at the same time, I didn't know as much. I wouldn't have to know as much probably about the deer to catch up to him as what I would to kill him when I'm set up on him in a certain place to kill him.
Yeah, you're compressing all of it's a just a shorter time frame of learning them. You're learning about them that day on the track, but you're not building like a relationship with them almost
This is another one that makes me kind of laugh. Is like I see a lot of trackers like they all have trail cameras. Like, why do you have a trail camera? So
inventory.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
just
do
to
you
know
need
what's around.
inventory though? I mean,
Well, trail cameras are just fun. Everybody loves
oh,
it.
okay.
They're fun. They're it's
Mm,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it goes back to that thing. I mean, like I don't care what you do as long as you go out there and you have fun. But
Yep.
just I've heard so many people say, "Oh, well, he's a sitter." Well, I mean, I don't care if you track, then go do it. I mean, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's just go do, have fun, do what you do.
Well, one of the really cool things about living in the Northeast is that you have access to all these different types of ways to hunt. And like Adirondacks is different than even Vermont, but you could do an Adirondacks sitting hunt. Finding a great location over a funnel with some scrapes, and you've found a deer in its area, and you can hunt there, kill a deer, and then you could drive down to Massachusetts and hunt a suburban bow hunt with your bow, and then you can go up to northern Maine and track, or you go back to the Adirondacks track there. But you have all this access to um, within short driving distances, like the Midwest. They would you're not even really covering one state sometimes, where you can hit 4 or 5 different borders here, get new tags, and try different ways of hunting. whether it's a bow, rifle, muzzle loader, tracking, sitting, suburban, big woods. Like there's all of that right here within like 2 hour drive. So you really can try it all if you want to.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. It that's what makes it unique, like living here, because we have things that other places don't have. I mean, I know a lot of people are like, I wouldn't want to live there. There aren't big deer there. Well, there are plenty of big deer. It's just we our deer have it a little more difficult to survive winters and stuff like that. And but I mean, they're out there. It's not like they're not out there.
Yeah, and it feels more rewarding when you get one, a good one in the Northeast. I feel like I haven't hunted outside. I went to North Dakota this year for the first time, my first kind of out of the Northeast hunt, and that's completely out of that's a way different style, right? Didn't even go to Midwest, which is kind of like a transition zone from
Yeah.
Northeast hunting. I went out to North Dakota, and that was a lot of fun. And that would have been a challenge too. If you go out there with a gun, it's a little bit easier to spot and stalk. In those western mountains with a gun than it is. I was out there with my bow trying to get within bow range of a deer that we watched bed in the morning from a distant, glassing knob. Right. That was a cool new experience but it puts things into perspective. It's just a different type of challenging hunt.
Yeah, I mean it's that's why I would tell people too to do everything you can. Like I don't know how I got as old as I am. Like I mean, because it seems like I started it just yesterday. Uh, and when I originally started going to the Midwest, like I didn't even want to come home. I'm like, I don't want to go home. I don't want to go back to the mountains. We don't see any deer there. It sucks. I'm never going to see deer as big as what I saw in the Midwest. But now I can't wait to come home. Like I wouldn't even care if I left the state now.
That was a feeling I had when I went to North Dakota too. It was Um, we hunted our asses off for 8 days. Come to find out, that area was hit with EHD pretty bad. The rancher that we were talking to said that he didn't think that his ranch and the is a 10,000 acre ranch and it abuts 20,000 acres of national lands. And he didn't seem to think that his area was affected as much, because it's pockets with the HD. But when we got out there, I got out there 4 days before the season started because just to glass. I went out early and I was like, I'm gonna glass for 4 days and try to locate a bunch of bucks for the rest of my team that's gonna be flying out, 3 days from now. And I had visions like I'm gonna be out there locating a 150 incher over here and 170 over here. And I didn't see a whitetail buck until the morning of the season. And we saw three bachelor bucks the morning the season opened, and they were 2.5-year-olds, and those were the only whitetail bucks that we saw the entire 8 days we were there hunting. And so by the end of that long days, I was like, "Oh my god, I can't wait to go back to Massachusetts where I have 15 or 20 mature bucks documented. I know within 5 miles of my house." Right?
Yeah, I
I
mean
was.
that,
It
and
was
that
like.
goes back to the whole thing of people saying, "Oh, it's easier out there." Well, go give it a whirl. And then another thing too is, I mean, you like there are a lot of guys who are really successful, and there are a lot of guys who I know a lot of guys. I mean, like my cousin is probably a lot better hunter than me, but I'm a lot better killer. And if you can't kill, then you'll never, you'll you could be a great hunter, but if you don't kill anything, people don't think you're a good hunter. I mean, but I know a lot of good hunters that just can't shoot.
It's like the guys that get stuck in the friend zone, going back to the chasing girls analogies, right?
Yeah,
He's perpetually the friend and can't ever close the deal, right?
yeah, exactly.
um but yeah, man, I think it's just there's so much nuance to hunting and different ways that it can be done, and I just thought it was interesting in your book how you touched upon is a territorial thing where the northeastern hunters go, "What are you doing going out to Iowa? It's easy. Or going to Kansas. That's easy." It almost they feel like you're cheating on them a little bit,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's a weird thing, right?
I just like to hunt. I don't care where I am.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. What do you shoot for? What's your gun of choice and your bow
I'm
of
not a
choice?
big I'm not a big gun guy. I mean, I when I was a kid growing up, my father's best friend who always hunted with us, he shot a gun with a man liquor stock. So I'm like, I want a man liquor stock. So I bought a Ruger Mark II, 270, and that's what I use, bolt action. Uh, and then I struggled with it a little bit early on, and then I had a match rifle trigger put in it. And then after I had the match rifle trigger put in it, all those me being a bad hunter went away. And then I started killing stuff. And then as far as archery, I've used everything over the years. I currently am sponsored by Dart and Archery, um, and that's the bow of choice right now. And and they're definitely they've been around forever, but now they have a new owner, and the new owner, Randy Kitts, he's trying to, they've always been like more of like an inventor where a lot of other bow companies have had used their patents, and now he's more into selling bows. So I think that in the coming years you're going to see a lot more Dartons out there.
Yeah, that's interesting because I went to the ATA show a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was a month ago now, and I remember going by a Darton booth, and I'd never heard of Darton before, and they were almost like taken aback. But again, I'm very like surface level with a lot of this stuff. I don't nerd out on equipment, and I don't do a whole bunch of, I don't have that industry knowledge. People
Yeah.
always make fun of me because they'll bring up a hunting celebrity, and I have no idea who they're talking about. I just go, I literally don't know who Lee and Tiffany are. Now that I do, because people keep bringing them up, but to me it's like I don't know who they are at all,
Yeah.
and I don't really care. And
I've never really followed like hunting. Like I don't really watch anything on YouTube. I've never watched anything on TV. I mean, it just I just go do it, and hopefully I get a little lucky along the way.
yeah. Yeah, well, that's the name of the game. But yeah, I saw Darton out there, and they were like, "Yeah, we've been around forever." And I
Yeah,
was just
over
like,
50 years.
"Yep." Like, sorry, I didn't know. But yeah, that's cool if they're actually making more of an effort to kind of,
Yeah. So if you want a new Darton, just go to X Spot Archery. It's in
yep,
right on the border of Mass and
yeah,
where I'm at.
Al.
Yeah.
So he's I was just on a phone with him yesterday. He's helping out on this 3D shoot that we're doing at the Springfield show.
Okay. So
Um,
you can help me and him out and go buy a couple Dartons.
yeah. Un- Unfortunately, we're going to have a couple of Bowtech adjustable bows there for people who've never shot before or
Yeah.
forgot their bows at home. Um, but yeah, send a message over to Dart and say, "Hey, let's kick Bowtech out."
That's
We'll
another
just
thing too. I mean, support. I mean, a lot of people don't support their local dealers, and I mean, you should support your local dealers. I
yeah,
mean,
support your local everything.
yeah,
Yep,
exactly. I mean, because
yep,
I mean, if you don't have local archery dealers, then if you don't know how to do your own stuff, you're going to be in trouble. I mean,
yeah. That's me to a T. I don't. A lot of bow hunters I talk to are like, "You don't make your own custom arrows, or you don't have a bow press at your house," and I'm like, "No, I don't. I
you
just
just
literally."
tell them you bring it to Brian. Brian does it for you.
Yeah, yeah. I just literally don't have the time to, if I nerded out in one more thing like that, if I got really like into
Yeah.
making then it takes time away from other things, and other things would suffer, and I'm maxed out right now. So that's the reason I don't turkey hunt right now,
Yeah.
because I know I'd get addicted to it, and it would make other areas of my life suffer. I can't add another crazy
Yeah, that
addiction.
happens. That's like me
Yep.
in archery.
Yep. But listen, I feel like we could talk for hours, and we've got a lot more to cover, and we can do a follow up podcast. But we've been going here for almost 2 hours now, and I want to be respectful of your time. And but I let's definitely do this again if you're up for it. We can do it again, and kind
We
of,
can talk anytime. We can kill deer or miss them.
yep, yep. And I'd love to, next time I'm up I grew up in Rutland, Vermont. It's not too far from where
Oh,
you're
no
at,
kidding.
right?
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm in Rutland a fair amount. All my friends live over that way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What's the stomping grounds? Your bar of choice when you go to Rutland. Rutland's
No,
one of those towns
I'm
that,
not a, believe it or not, I'm not a drink. I've never had a drop of alcohol in my life.
really.
Yeah. When I was 5 years old, I was diagnosed a type 1 diabetic, and the doctor told me, don't ever drink or smoke, and you might live past 40. So I never drank or smoked.
Wow.
Yep.
Well,
So
that's
I don't hang out in the bars. So don't drink. I don't. Yeah, not my cup of tea.
yeah, it's funny. It's just when someone says like, "Oh yeah, I go to Rutland quite a bit. My friends are there." It's like that's the first question.
Yeah, I
Rutland.
mean, they live a little south of there. One of
Yeah,
my friends owns a body shop over there, and
cool.
then a couple other friends live a little south of there. So,
Yep.
and I mean, I'm not. I mean, I can get there in 40 minutes.
Yeah. Yep. So that's the area I grew up kind of hunting.
Oh,
But more towards.
so did you hunt in Whitehall at all?
No, I never did. But Hubbardton's where my deer camp is there.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah,
Yeah. So over not too far from you
you
there.
hunted on the battlefield.
Nope. Nope.
Is it?
Never up there.
Oh,
But I think there's some good deer up at the battlefield. There's some bigger woods over there. We're kind of in the rolling hills.
so
You know,
were you a hand glider?
I drive by that hang gliding spot all the time. I can remember being a kid looking up and going, "What the heck? They're just jumping off a cliff and flying across
Yeah,
the
there
highway
you
there." Yeah,
go.
but
Mm,
cool, man. We'll do it again. I really appreciate you coming on. And for anybody who is interested, again, we'll just talk. Get Todd's book, Pursuing Public Land Bucks. Where do
yeah.
they go to get that,
They
Todd?
can get it right on my website, toddmead.com. But if they do go on there, my first two books are on there, but they're no longer available. So don't order them.
All right, cool. Yeah, so go to toddb.com. The book is awesome. It really is super readable. And again, you've got a great writing style. So for anybody that wants to learn, and this one is more so about hunting, doing out of state hunts and preparing for a DIY hunt. But there's all kinds of stuff you can learn about hunting right from where you live currently, anyway, out of this book. But for sure, if you're thinking about going out west or Midwest and doing a DIY hunt, there's some great stuff in this book. So go get it. And Todd, thanks a lot, man. We'll do it
Thank you.
again sometime soon.
It was a good time.
Yep. All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
See ya.